I was 42 years old, and for most of that year, I would have told anyone my life was stable. I worked as a curriculum designer for a mid-sized education company in Denver. My days were structured, quiet, predictable in a way I used to find comforting. I built lesson frameworks, revised digital programs, sat through meetings about standards and pacing guides, and came home just after 6. Laura usually got home a little later. We ate dinner, talked about ordinary things, watched half an episode of something neither of us was fully paying attention to, and went to bed. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt solid. That mattered more to me. We had been married 11 years, long enough that our routines had settled into something almost automatic. Sunday coffee on the back patio, even when the air was cold enough to sting. Thai takeout twice a month from the same place on Colfax. Her reading in the corner of the couch with one leg tucked under her, my laptop open while I pretended to finish work. The kind of life that doesn't look dramatic from the outside, because it isn't. It just feels earned. That was why the changes stood out. At first, they were so small, I almost felt embarrassed noticing them. Laura started keeping her phone face down on the kitchen counter. Then it stopped staying on the counter at all. It went with her to the laundry room, to the bathroom, out onto the deck when she said she needed air. If I walked in while she was texting, her thumb moved too fast. Screen gone dark before I got close enough to see the light fade. I told myself it was work. She said they were understaffed. A new regional director. Extra projects. Late calls. She had explanations ready every time, and none of them sounded ridiculous on their own. That was the problem. A lie built out of normal details is harder to touch. Then came the distance. Not a fight, not even coldness. Exactly. Just a soft pulling away. So gradual it took me weeks to admit I felt it. She still kissed me goodbye in the morning, but sometimes it landed on my cheek instead of my mouth. She still asked about my day, but her eyes drifted before I finished answering. At night, she started going to bed later than I did. I would wake up at 1 in the morning and find her side of the mattress untouched, the hallway dark except for the pale line of light under the guest room door. One Thursday, she came home after 9, wearing a gray coat I hadn't seen in months. Her hair smelled faintly like hotel soap, clean and sharp, not the jasmine shampoo she kept in our shower. She set her purse down carefully, like there was something fragile inside it. "Long day?" I asked. She gave me a tired smile, without really looking at me. Brutal. That was all. I stood there in the kitchen, one hand still on the edge of the counter, watching her walk upstairs. Nothing had happened yet. Not really. But for the first time in our marriage, the life I trusted felt like it had developed a hairline crack. And once I saw it, I couldn't stop looking. The first clear break came on a Tuesday. I remember because I left work early after a district call got canceled. It was just after 5. Still light outside, that thin, cold Denver light that makes the houses on our street look flatter than they are. I pulled into the driveway and noticed Laura's car was already there. That alone felt strange. She was usually the one coming in late now, walking to the door with some polished excuse about deadlines, client dinners, or another planning session that ran longer than expected. Seeing her home before me sure felt like a good surprise. Instead, I sat in the car for a few extra seconds with the engine off, looking at the front windows and feeling that same pressure in my chest I'd been carrying for weeks. When I stepped inside, the house was quiet except for the sound of her voice. Soft, warm, different. She was in the dining room, half hidden by the wall, speaking in a tone I hadn't heard directed at me in months. Not loud enough for every word to carry, but enough. A low laugh, then another. The kind you don't fake out of politeness. The kind that slips out when you forget you might be overheard. I set my keys down more gently than I needed to. She said, "No, stop." But she was smiling when she said it. I could hear that too. Then a pause. Then quieter. "I know. Me too." I didn't move. For a few seconds I just stood in the entryway, one hand still on the edge of the console table, staring at the dark framed photo above it. Our anniversary trip to Santa Fe, both of us sunburned and squinting, looking like people who had never learned how to lie to each other. A floorboard shifted under my shoe. The call ended instantly. By the time I turned the corner into the dining room, Laura was lowering her phone from her ear, her face composed too quickly to be natural. She was sitting at the table with a glass of white wine, legs crossed, the screen already dark in her hand. "Oh," she said, "you're home early." Sounds like I interrupted something. Her expression changed for half a second. Not guilt, calculation. "It was just Melissa from work," she said. "We were talking about the workshop next month." I looked at her phone, then at the glass of wine, then back at her. "Melissa makes you laugh like that?" Laura gave a small shrug and stood up, carrying the glass to the kitchen as if movement itself could smooth the moment over. We were joking about one of the presenters. "Ethan, not everything is suspicious." That sentence stayed with me because I hadn't used the word suspicious. I followed her with my eyes as she rinsed the glass, shoulders relaxed in a way that looked practiced. Maybe that was the moment I knew, not because I had proof, not even because of the call. Because when people tell the truth, they usually answer the question you asked. When they lie, they start defending themselves from the one you haven't said yet. I didn't confront her. That would have been the obvious move. Immediate, emotional, final. Instead, I nodded like her answer made sense, grabbed a glass from the cabinet, and asked what she wanted for dinner. My voice sounded normal. Even to me, that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling long after Laura fell asleep beside me. Melissa from work. I repeated it in my head, testing it against what I had heard. The tone, the pause, the softness in her voice when she said "me too." It didn't fit, so I stopped asking questions out loud and started paying attention. The next morning, I woke up before her. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was how quickly she reached for her phone the moment her alarm went off. Not to snooze it, to check something. Her thumb moved fast, her face still heavy with sleep but focused. She angled the screen away from me. That was new. I made coffee, watched her from the kitchen as she stood by the window, typing, then deleting, then typing again. When she noticed me looking, she locked the phone and smiled like nothing had happened. Morning. Small word. Clean. Empty. Over the next week, patterns started forming. She mentioned going to the gym 3 times. I had never seen her pack a gym bag, never saw new workout clothes. But suddenly, she had a routine she'd just gotten back into. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday mornings. Except on Thursday, I drove past the gym on my way to a meeting. Her car wasn't there. I didn't call her. I kept driving. Then there were the trips. Last-minute thing, she said one evening, standing in the bedroom with her suitcase half-zipped. 2 days, maybe 3. For what? Leadership workshop. I told you about it. She hadn't. Or maybe she had, buried somewhere in a conversation I hadn't thought to question at the time. That was the way she did it. Plant details early, let them grow into something that felt familiar later. What hotel? I asked. She hesitated, just for a second. They haven't finalized it yet. I'll text you when I get there. She didn't. Instead, she sent a picture that night. A generic one. Bed, lamp, neutral artwork on the wall. No view out the window. No identifying details. Made it. Exhausted. Love you. I stared at the message longer than necessary. Then I typed back, "Love you too." I didn't believe it when I sent it. By the time she came back, I had stopped trying to catch her in a single lie. I was watching something else now. Consistency. The way her stories lined up too neatly. The way every explanation came just fast enough to prevent a follow-up question. The way her schedule had become unpredictable, but her answers had become rehearsed. One night, she came home just after 10, heels in her hand, walking barefoot across the hardwood like she didn't want to make noise. She froze when she saw me sitting in the dark living room. "I didn't know you were still up." I couldn't sleep. A pause. Then she smiled soft-controlled. "Long day." I nodded. I didn't ask anything else. Because at that point, I wasn't looking for answers anymore. I was waiting for a mistake. The mistake didn't come from her. It came from me getting tired of waiting. Saturday morning, she left early. Said she had a team session downtown. Coffee, strategy, something vague enough to sound professional, but empty enough to avoid details. She forgot her iPad. That was unusual. Laura didn't forget things. Not her phone, not her planner, not anything connected to her work or her carefully managed routine. But that morning, it was sitting on the kitchen counter, screen dark, case slightly open. I stood there for a long time before touching it, not because I felt guilty, because I knew that once I did, whatever version of my life I was still holding on to would be gone. The screen lit up the moment I opened it. No password, or maybe there was one, but had already been unlocked recently. Either way, I didn't have to break in. Her email was open. Nothing there. Calendar next. A few entries. Some matched what she had told me. Others didn't. Different locations. Vague titles. Consult. Session. Follow up. No names. Too clean. I almost put it down. Then I opened her messages. At first, it looked normal. Threads with coworkers. Group chats. Short exchanges. Safe. Then I saw it. No contact name. Just a number. The last message was from her. I wish we didn't have to hide like this. My thumb hovered for a second. Then I opened the thread. It wasn't what I expected. No photos. No explicit language. No obvious physical affair laid out in detail. It was worse. Long messages. Paragraphs. Late-night timestamps. Conversations that stretched across days like a continuous thread neither of them wanted to drop. His name appeared further up. Daniel Cross. I didn't recognize it. I kept reading. We're wasting time pretending this isn't real. That's not fair. I have a life here. So do I. That's the problem. A pause in the messages. Then hers. What would it even look like? His reply came minutes later. Something honest. For once. I felt something shift in my chest. Not sharp. Not explosive. Cold. I scrolled further. They talked about leaving. Not dramatically. Not impulsively. Carefully. Logistics. Cities. Timing. What they would tell people. What they wouldn't. There was no rush in it. No chaos. Just two people building an exit from their current lives like it was a project they were managing together. One message stopped me. I don't even think it's about being with you, she wrote. It's about finally being seen. I read that line 3 times. Then his response. I see you. That's why this is happening. I set the iPad down slowly. So that was it. Not a physical affair. Not yet. Something quieter. Something deeper. She wasn't sneaking around for excitement. She was replacing me, piece by piece, conversation by conversation, building something with someone else while still living inside our life. I looked around the kitchen. Same table. Same chairs. Same morning light cutting across the floor. Nothing had changed, except now I understood that I was already alone in it. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to confront her. I felt the need to think. I didn't confront her. That would have been the expected reaction. Anger. Questions. Demands. A scene in the kitchen. Voices raised. Something breaking just to match what I had just read. Instead, I closed the iPad, exactly the way I found it, and went upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the indentation on her pillow. For a moment, I tried to picture her saying those same words out loud. I feel seen. Not to me. To him. Daniel Cross. The name didn't mean anything yet, but it would. I stood up, walked into my office, and opened my laptop if she was planning an exit. Then I wasn't going to be the last one to move. The first thing I did was check our accounts. Joint checking. Savings. Retirement allocations. Nothing dramatic had happened yet. No large withdrawals. No obvious sign she was already preparing financially. That told me something important. She was still in the planning phase, which meant I had time. I created a new folder on my desktop. No dramatic name. Nothing that would stand out if she ever saw it. Just a date. Inside it, I started organizing everything. Account balances, monthly expenses, copies of statements, screenshots of anything that mattered. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted control. Over the next few days, I moved carefully. I opened a separate account in my name only. quietly redirected part of my income. Nothing aggressive, nothing that would trigger an alert or a conversation. I reviewed my work contract, remote options, transfer opportunities. Boston came up first. Different time zone, different network. Far enough that accidental overlap wouldn't happen. I reached out to HR with a neutral question, exploring flexibility for relocation. No urgency, no explanation, just interest. At home, nothing changed. That was the most important part. I still asked about her day, still made coffee in the morning, still sat across from her at dinner while she talked about work, about meetings, about people whose names I now knew might not even exist. She smiled more than she had weeks before. That was the part that stayed with me. Not guilt, relief. Like whatever she had built with him was starting to feel real enough that she didn't have to pretend as much anymore. One night, she reached across the table and touched my hand. "I feel like we've been distant," she said softly. I looked at her fingers resting on mine. Warm, familiar. "Yeah," I said, "we should fix that." I held her gaze for a second longer than necessary. "We should." She smiled, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the person I married. That was the last time I let myself see her that way. A week later, I signed a lease in Boston. Small place, 1 bedroom, minimal furniture, temporary, functional, mine. I didn't tell her. I didn't pack obvious things. Just small shifts, documents disappearing from drawers. A second laptop bag she didn't question. Clothes rotating out slowly, replaced with old things I didn't wear anymore. At work, my transfer was approved faster than I expected. 2 weeks. That was all it took. 2 weeks between knowing the truth and building my way out. On the last night, she fell asleep before me. Her phone was on the nightstand, screen lighting up once in the dark. I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to anymore. Everything I needed to know was already clear. I got up quietly, walked into the living room, and looked around one last time. The couch, the bookshelves, the framed photos we never took down. A life that looked complete from the outside, but wasn't. I went back to the bedroom, sat at my desk, and wrote a single note. No explanation, no accusations, just one sentence. "You chose this." I left it on the kitchen counter the next morning, and then I walked out without making a sound. Boston felt different the moment I stepped out of the cab. Colder, sharper. The air carried that quiet coastal weight, like everything moved a little slower, but meant a little more. It didn't feel like a fresh start. It felt like distance, which was exactly what I needed. The apartment was smaller than I remember from the photos. 1 narrow window, pale walls, a kitchen that looked like it had been designed as an afterthought. My suitcase sat in the middle of the room longer than it should have. No rush, no noise, no one asking where I'd been. That was the first thing I noticed. Silence without tension. I unpacked slowly. Not everything, just enough to function. Laptop on the table. A few shirts in the closet. Bathroom essentials lined up with precision that came naturally now. Everything had a place. Everything stayed where I left it. Work started the next morning. Same company, same responsibilities, different time zone, different people on the calls. My camera stayed off more than it used to. No one questioned it. I delivered what I needed to deliver. Clean, efficient, no extra conversations. I became smaller, not weaker, more contained. Days fell into a rhythm quickly. Wake up early. Coffee black. No music. Just the low hum of the city outside the window. Work until late afternoon. Walk for an hour, no destination. Dinner somewhere quiet or something simple at home. No distractions. No explanations. At first, there were moments when my hand would reach for my phone out of habit. Not to call her, just to check if she had tried. Missed calls, messages, something. There was nothing. That told me more than any confrontation could have. She hadn't tried to stop me. Or maybe she had, and I had already removed every path she could use. Either way, the result was the same. I was gone, and she stayed. A week passed. Then 2. I started sleeping through the night again. No waking up to empty space beside me. No light under a door. No quiet voices behind walls. just stillness. One evening, I caught my reflection in the window as the city lights blurred behind me. I looked different, not better, clearer, like something unnecessary had been stripped away. I started noticing small things again, the way the streets curved unpredictably, the sound of footsteps echoing in narrow alleys, the way strangers didn't look at each other, and how that felt strangely comforting. No one here knew me. No one here expected anything from me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't performing a role I didn't realize I had been playing. Laura still existed, somewhere, with her plans, with him, but she no longer existed in my day-to-day reality. And that was a shift. Not anger, not closure, absence. Clean, precise, final. One night, sitting alone at the small kitchen table, I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't miss her. I missed a version of my life that I thought was real, and that version didn't exist anymore. So I stopped looking back at it and started building something that did. She didn't call the first day, or the second, or the third. That silence almost felt intentional, like she was giving me space, or assuming I'd come back on my own. That whatever this was, it was temporary, a reaction, something that would fade once I cooled off. She underestimated something important. I wasn't reacting. I had already left. By the end of the first week, the messages started. Unknown number. Ethan, were you? I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then locked it. No reply. A few hours later, another. This isn't funny. Please call me. Then another. I came home, you just gone? What is this? I muted the thread. The next day, she tried email. Subject line, we need to talk. I read it once. Not for emotion, for information. She said she didn't understand what happened, that she was worried, that this wasn't like me, that I was scaring her. No mention of Daniel. No mention of anything real. Just confusion. I archived it. Then she escalated. By the second week, HR forwarded me a message. Laura had contacted my office. Not aggressively. Polite. Controlled. Just try to reach my husband. I think something might be wrong. I replied with one line. I'm safe. Please direct any further inquiries to me, not my family. That was it. No details. No opening. That was when panic started setting in for her, because she lost control of the situation. A few days later, I got a call from a colleague I trusted. She showed up here, he said, at the office. Ethan, she looked off. I didn't ask for details. I already knew what that meant. The version of events she had built in her head, where she was slowly transitioning into something new, something better, had been interrupted by me disappearing, without permission, without discussion, without giving her a chance to manage it. Then came the message that mattered, not from her, from him, Daniel Cross. Unknown number again. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I read it twice. Then the next message came. Laura is not in a good place. You leaving like that, without talking, it's affecting her more than you think. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. There it was, the calm tone, the measured language, the same kind of voice I had read in those messages on the iPad. He wasn't aggressive. He was positioning, try and control the narrative. You should at least hear her out, he wrote. This is what you think it is. That line almost made me smile, not because it was convincing, because it was predictable. I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked the number. Both of them were still playing the same game, explaining, framing, adjusting the story until it sounded acceptable. But they were doing it without me now, and that was the part they couldn't handle, because I wasn't asking questions anymore. I wasn't reacting. I wasn't even present. And without me there to absorb it, their version of events had nowhere to land. A few nights later, I walked past the harbor, the wind cutting sharp across the water, my hands deep in my coat pockets. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another message. I know you're in Boston. I stopped walking, looked at the screen, then at the dark water ahead of me. She was getting closer, but it didn't change anything, because by the time she found me, there would be nothing left to come back to. I met Claire on a Wednesday. It wasn't planned. Nothing about that day was. I had taken a different route back from work, cutting through a quieter part of the city where the streets narrowed, and the buildings looked older, brick worn down by time. Windows slightly uneven, like they had settled into place instead of being designed that way. There was a construction barrier set up along one of the sidewalks. Not loud, not chaotic, just controlled work. Careful work. That's what made me slow down. Inside, a woman stood near the entrance of a partially restored building, studying a set of blueprints held flat against a wooden board. No hard hat, just a long dark coat, sleeves pushed back slightly, pencil tucked behind her ear. She wasn't rushing. She was observing. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe because everything in my life up to that point had felt like it was either breaking quietly or being rebuilt too fast. And she looked like she was doing neither, just restoring. "You're standing in the wrong place," she said without looking up. Her voice was calm, direct. I glanced down, then back at her. "Am I?" She nodded slightly toward a line marked faintly on the pavement. "That's where they'll move the scaffolding in about 2 minutes." I stepped back. Right on cue, a truck edged forward behind me. I looked at her again. "You do this for a living?" Now she looked up. Gray eyes. Steady. "Architectural restoration," she said. "Mostly historic buildings. This one's from the 1800s. I nodded once. "You're fixing what someone else almost let fall apart." She held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Something like that. There was no smile. No attempt to extend the conversation. And for some reason, that made me stay another few seconds. "Does it work?" I asked. "What?" "Putting something back together after it's already started to break." She considered that. Not quickly, not casually. "It depends," she said finally, "on whether the foundation is still worth saving." I didn't answer, because I already knew mine wasn't. She shifted her attention back to the plans, like the conversation had reached its natural end. No exchange of numbers. No forced politeness. Just a moment. I walked away, but something about it stayed with me. Not her specifically. The way she spoke. Precise. Unemotional. Honest in a way that didn't need to be explained. Over the next few days, I found myself taking that same route again. Not intentionally. At least that's what I told myself. She was there most of the time. Same position. Same focus. Occasionally speaking to workers. Always calm. Always in control of the space around her, without raising her voice. The third time, she noticed. "You're either lost," she said, not looking up, "or this is intentional." I stopped a few feet from her. "Maybe both." That got the smallest reaction. Not a smile, just a shift. "Claire," she said, like she was stating a fact, not introducing herself. "Ethan." A pause. Then she nodded once and went back to work. That was how it started. No pressure. No history. No lies waiting underneath the surface. Just two people standing in a space where nothing needed to be explained. And for the first time since I left Denver, I didn't feel like I was rebuilding something broken. I felt like I was standing on something solid. She found me on a Friday. I knew it would happen eventually. The message, "I know you're in Boston," wasn't a bluff. It was a timeline. Still, when I opened the door and saw her standing there, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt expected. Laura looked different. Not physically, not at first glance. Same coat, same posture, same controlled way of holding herself together. But something underneath it had shifted. The precision was gone. There was tension in the way she held her jaw, like she'd been clenching for days. "You're really here," she said. Not a question. I stepped aside just enough for her to understand she could come in if she wanted. She hesitated, then walked past me. Her eyes moved across the apartment quickly. Small space. Minimal furniture. No trace of anything shared. "Is this it?" she asked quietly. "Yes." She nodded like she was filing that away. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she turned to face me. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. I leaned against the edge of the table, arms relaxed. "Explain what?" Her expression tightened. "You just disappeared. Left a note like I did something unforgivable, without even talking to me." I didn't respond immediately. I watched her, the pacing of her breathing. The way her hands moved slightly, like she was holding back something larger. Then I said it. Daniel Cross. That was the moment everything cracked. Not loudly, but completely. She looked away first, just for a second, then back at me. It's not what you think. Of course it wasn't. It never is, I said. She stepped closer, shaking her head. No, Ethan, listen to me. You don't understand what that was. I read enough. That's the problem, she said quickly. You read part of it. I didn't move, didn't interrupt, because now I wanted to hear it, not for closure, for accuracy. Her voice steadied as she spoke, like she had rehearsed this somewhere along the way. Daniel runs these leadership intensives. You know that. I told you about the workshop. You told me pieces of it. She ignored that. He studies behavioral patterns, decision-making, emotional attachment in high-functioning adults. She swallowed. I was part of that. I said nothing, because I already knew where this was going. Or at least, I thought I did. He builds connections, she continued. Controlled ones. Structured. It's part of the research. To see how people respond to emotional intimacy outside their existing lives. I looked at her for a long moment, then asked very simply, "And leaving your husband was part of the study?" Her face tightened. "No, that wasn't supposed to happen." "Of course it wasn't. They guide you," she said. "Conversations, vulnerability, escalation. It feels real because it is real to you, but there's a framework behind it." He knew exactly how to... She stopped herself. "How to what?" I asked. She exhaled slowly. "How to make me feel seen." The same words. Verbatim. I felt something settle into place. Not anger. Understanding. "You're saying you were manipulated." "Yes. You didn't choose it." Her eyes met mine. There it was. The question underneath everything. I held her gaze, then shook my head once. "No." She froze. "You answered every message." I said calmly. "You built something with him. Planned something with him." That's what I'm trying to explain. I know what it is. I cut in, not raising my voice. I read it. Her composure started slipping. "This wasn't real, Ethan. It wasn't. It was real enough for you to leave." That stopped her. Silence filled the room. Heavy, final. After a few seconds, she tried again, quieter now. "I didn't leave." I looked at her, then at the door, then back at her. "I did." That was the difference. And she finally understood it. Her shoulders dropped slightly, like something inside her gave way. "I came here to fix this," she said. I nodded once. "I know." And I straightened, stepping away from the table. "There's nothing to fix." She stared at me, not angry, not defensive, just empty, because for the first time, there was no version of this where she could adjust the story and bring me back into it. Whatever Daniel had built, whatever she had believed, whatever explanation she carried across the country, none of it mattered anymore, because I wasn't part of that system. I wasn't reacting. I wasn't participating. I was already gone, and she was just now arriving at that realization. She didn't argue after that. That was the part that stayed with me. No raised voice. No last attempt to twist a narrative. No emotional collapse designed to pull me back into something I had already stepped out of. She just stood there for a few seconds, looking around the apartment like she was trying to understand how everything had become so small. "So that's it?" she asked quietly. "It was over before I left," I said. She nodded slowly, not in agreement, in recognition. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope, placing it on the table between us. "I brought this anyway." I didn't touch it. "What is it?" "Everything," she said. "The house, the accounts. I already spoke to a lawyer. I signed what I could. The rest just needs you." I looked at the envelope, then back at her. "Why?" A pause. Then, honestly, for the first time since she arrived, "Because this isn't something I can undo." No excuses, no framing, just a statement. I picked up the envelope, felt the weight of the papers inside, then set it back down. "I'll have someone review it," I said. She nodded, Another silence. Then she moved toward the door. No hesitation this time. Her hand rested on the handle for a second before she spoke again. I did love you. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't hear her. Because I was deciding whether it mattered. It doesn't change anything, I said finally. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened the door and left. No drama. No looking back. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind her. And that was it. No final message. No lingering thread. Just absence. Clean. Complete. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Efficient. Quiet. Exactly the way I wanted it. I didn't go back to Denver. There was nothing there that belonged to me anymore. Boston became routine. Work expanded. New projects. New responsibilities. I took on more than I used to, not to distract myself, but because I could. There was no one pulling my attention in directions I didn't understand anymore. No hidden conversations. No second version of my life running in parallel. Just one. Clear. Simple. Real. Claire didn't ask questions I didn't offer answers to. That was the first thing I noticed. We started with small conversations, then longer ones. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into quiet dinners that didn't feel like performances. She didn't try to fix anything. Didn't analyze. Didn't dig. She just stayed consistent. One evening, standing in that same street near the building she was restoring, she looked at me and said, "You don't look like someone who's rebuilding anymore." I glanced at the structure behind her. Layers exposed. Brick carefully cleaned. Pieces replaced where needed. What I look like? I asked. She considered that. Like someone who stopped pretending something broken was worth saving. I nodded once, because that was exactly it. Months later, I signed the final documents. Closed the last account tied to that life. Filed everything away. No ceremony. No reflection. Just completion. That night, Claire and I sat by the water, the city light stretching across the surface in long, steady lines. No noise. No urgency. Just quiet. I looked out across the harbor and realized something simple. I hadn't lost anything real. I had walked away from something that only looked real until I chose to see it clearly. And once I did, there was nothing left to hold on to, only something better to build. This time without illusion,